This episode's guest is Deborah. She is the founder of the Blind Kitchen, a unique project helping blind and low vision people cook safely, creatively, and independently. Deborah is a long-term advocate for disability rights. When she experienced significant vision loss, she didn't give up her love of cooking. Instead, she found new ways to work with her senses, her skills, and a lot of ingenuity. In this episode, she shares what it was like to go through culinary school without sight, how she developed adaptive tools that can make a kitchen safer and more accessible, and why restoring confidence through cooking can be so powerful. Whether you cook every day or barely know your way around a pan, Deborah's story and her work might just change how you think about independence, identity, and what we mean by ability in the first place. What sparked the idea to launch the Blind Kitchen and the focus on cooking for people with visual impairments?
So because I'm visually impaired myself and I like teaching adults, I wanted to come up with a way to teach adults a subject, but when I went for my blind skills training, I didn't know what subject I wanted to teach. I had taught in the past as part of my careers, but I knew I wanted to teach something different, but not what. And I was taking a meal prep class at the Blind Center, and I found that I really enjoyed it. And so I decided, I thought, I can cook, I can teach this. Will be what I teach for the next part of my career path. And then the light bulb went off because I said, I don't know how to cook. I was not a good cook. And so I did some research on it and whatever, and realized that the best way to teach cooking, which is a very multi thing. It's about getting recipes, accessing and reading them. It's about getting supplies. It's about getting ingredients, cleaning, organizing, labeling. It's all over the place. And so I thought, how can I get this all organized? And realized that there are people out there who have already organized this information, and they're called culinary schools. So I decided to explore it, and it ended up working out for me that I was able to attend as the only blind student. And then I still just wanted to go back and teach adults at the Oregon Commission for the Blind. But I graduated in June of 2019, and March of 2020, COVID hit. And so I was paused effectively for a year and a half because the whole world was confused about this new virus that was going around. Could people be in the same room together? And I think teaching cooking remotely to people with vision loss is above my pay grade. That's how I ended up with the Blind Kitchen. I had a year and a half to organize all the information I'd learned and discovered, problem solving in culinary school. And so that's how the Blind Kitchen got started. It was not on the radar until it was.
And what were the early challenges adapting recipes or kitchen tools for blind cooks?
People are afraid of the kitchen, especially if you have vision loss. Even if you knew how to cook before, and now you're like, I can't cook anymore. I might cut myself. I might burn myself. I might embarrass myself. So the most difficult thing was finding a way to message to people, you can get in the kitchen with sharp knives and tools and not cut yourself. It's possible. There's tools, there's strategies. Same thing with burning yourself. There are tools and strategies because even people that can see cut themselves and burn themselves, and that doesn't stop them from doing it. But if you can't see the blade of the knife, or if you can't see if the pan is centered on the stove or not, there is a rational fear there. But the most difficult, problematic part was getting people to buy into the fact that it really could be done.
How has your personal experience influenced the design of your recipes and content?
So, in line with your podcast, which is one of the reasons I really like it, I learned so many things in culinary school, and that's where I fell in love with cooking. It wasn't like I loved cooking, let me go get a degree in it. It was like, I need to learn how to cook. And so one of the things that I found most useful for the Blind Kitchen is the science of cooking. If you get something to a certain temperature, it's going to act a certain way. If I get water to 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees, bubbles are going to form, and they're going to come, and they're going to disappear as steam. And if the temperature gets that high, it's going to affect pasta in certain ways. It's going to affect potatoes in certain ways. And eggs, when they get to a certain temperature, the proteins are going to be affected. So the science and chemistry of culinary school taught me so much to help other people with vision loss. Say, you don't have to be able to look at that egg to know it's done, or look at that cake to know if it's done. There are about 12 ways to know, and one of the most helpful tools that helps me to access that scientific information is a talking thermometer. So even though I can't see the digital display that's on the screen or see where the mercury has risen to, however people access temperatures of foods, the talking thermometer can tell me that information clearly, and then I can know for certain what the next step is. Should I stop this from cooking? So there's a lot of ways technology and science have powered the decisions for the tools and strategies I've selected for the blind kitchen.
So there's a talking thermometer. What other ways do you kind of adapt the kitchen?
So we have talking scales, so that if you're a baker and you want to weigh your food instead of measuring it out by volume, which is very popular, especially in professional bakeries, I can get that same information somebody else can get through their eyes through my ears. There are things where I can get visual information, like I can hold up my phone camera, call this organization called Be My Eyes, and it's international, as is another one called IRA, and I make the call. One of them is free. One of them you do a subscription, but then they're bonded and they're well trained. The others are run by volunteers, and it's lovely. But you just don't know exactly who you're going to get on the other end. But they can look through the camera on my phone, and I can say, is this meat pink in the middle? And I hope that that person can cook. That's always the gamble. But then they can look through. So their science and technology has absolutely affected the way I've selected tools and things, because it's never just simple and straightforward. It's always a combination of factors.
And do you have like a favorite tactile kind of auditory technique for helping visually impaired people to cook confidently?
Yeah. So one of the biggest struggles for people is how to center a pan over a heat source, whether you're using gas or whether you're using a glass top stove or a coil. You can't really touch the burner or anything to make sure the bottom of your pan to make sure it's heated. But one of the things I do know, and again, this is using science and temperature, is if I'm on a glass top stove, which means I have no tactile information at all. Once I can turn the burner on and then hover above it with my hand so I know about where it is. But once I put that pan down, I'm guessing, except that I'm not. What I'm going to do is you can take your fingertip and touch the very top of a hot pan, even if it's full of oil, even if it's full of boiling water or, cooking food, and you can touch the top of it, of that rim of that pan for just a second, just to tap it. And your finger will come away and you won't be burned. It'll cool immediately. And I can do that no matter how hot the pan is, as long as I'm careful to tap it. I can't touch liquid in the pan, and I can't touch food in the pan because my finger, when it touches it, it's going to have some of the food on it. And even if I bring my finger away quickly, it's going to continue to burn until that food element on my fingertip cools. So I'm going to be very careful, and I'm just going to tap like at 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and I'm tapping, and if it is centered above the heat source, it's going to be equally hot to my quick touches all the way around the top. But let's say I'm stirring something and I accidentally knock it off center, but I don't know that I have. You're stirring big chunks of vegetables or something in the pan. It can be hard to feel that very slight shift of your pan. And so I'm going to still continue to touch it. That's what I mostly do when I'm at the stove. And I touch it at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And now I'm up at 11, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, that's hot. That is really hot. What I know then is that my pan is off center. And the heat is now not underneath the pan at 11 o'clock. It's climbing the side of the pan, which allows the pan to get much hotter quicker than the other perimeter of that pan. So I just have to gently nudge the pan back in the direction where it's hot, and then again give it a minute or two to adjust, and then I'm going to touch again. And it's like, oop, it's still a little bit hotter, but it's better. I'm going to do a gentle nudge again. So now I'm not using my vision. I don't have to call for help. I am using temperature and my fingertips, this time not with like a talking thermometer, but just that information with my brain to know where my pan is and that it's in a good place or that I need to adjust it.
And what community responses or feedback has touched you most since you've launched the Blind Kitchen?
You know, there definitely is a group. And so the baby boomers in the world are aging. Medical care is better. People are living longer. But with living longer, it's not uncommon that people lose their hearing or their vision. They have vision problems. It doesn't happen to everyone, but it's not uncommon in the aging population. And there are a lot of people out there that have for many, many years been the cooks for their families. They've done the Hanukkah or the Thanksgiving or, New Year's Day soup. And now, because of vision loss, they were afraid to get back in the kitchen. So either their families have contacted and found the Blind Kitchen or they themselves have. And so I get emails and calls and testimonials when I'm doing presentations and such that they were really depressed at thinking they would never, never, never get back in the kitchen again. But because of the Blind Kitchen and the strategies and things that it offers, that they are now able to get back into the kitchen, and the way that it's so beautifully stated, they recover a part of their identity, an important part of their identity that they thought was gone forever. Because people that cook for other people, especially if you're cooking for a holiday or if you're cooking something nutritious for a health issue that your loved one may have, it's absolutely a love language. And if that's the way you express your love, and now you can't, that's a big hole inside of you. That is the feedback that has touched me most personally, because I can relate to it, and I can also hear the emotion and gratitude in people's voices as having found the Blind Kitchen.
How do you hope that the Blind Kitchen evolves? What is your plans for training, partnerships or products?
Yeah, I'm always looking for ways to collaborate. I want to retain my brand and my identity, but I do like doing collaborations, and I've got a couple of them in the future. But the other thing is I'm a teacher and a cook, so I'm always looking for where are the gaps in teaching people with vision loss to cook. And one of the big gaps is young adults with vision loss. The parents are very afraid of letting them in their kitchens. They don't want their kids to get burnt or cut. It makes sense. That's their job, is to protect their kids, and they're doing it. But the gap in this is the parents don't have vision loss themselves. So they know how to cook, and they don't need their children there. But there's that conflict with, I want my child to grow up to be independent and prepare meals for themselves as adults. And so I'm working with different agencies to, instead of training people with vision loss how to cook, my next curriculum is to do presentations and trainings to parents that can see, to sighted parents of children that have vision loss, and help teach them, how do you make your kitchen successful? How can your child know when the oven is on 350 degrees if they can't see it? And there are about 12 different right answers as to how you can mark your stove in such a way that it doesn't affect the people in the household that can see, but it also enables someone with vision loss in that same household to be able to access that same information without being able to see. And I've done a couple of these trainings so far, and they've gone on super well. The parents are grateful because they don't have that knowledge themselves. How could they know? If you don't have vision loss yourself, how can you teach someone with vision loss the skills that you don't have? So that is the direction I'm going in now, is how do I teach these parents to make their kitchens accessible? And oftentimes it's giving the parents the peace of mind that your child can empty a pot of pasta into the sink, hot cooked pasta, safely and without burning themselves. And I train them. I've got a special pan that can help them to do that anyone in the household can use. Start with cold water and have the child walk from the stove to the sink until you're confident that the child, and then move up to warm water. So I'm loving building this curriculum because I think it's going to affect so many people and make so many kitchens accessible for young adults with vision loss to become more independent.
So how do you balance cooking demonstrations with education and storytelling for your audiences?
So I tend to go where my audience wants to go. I don't do a lot of cooking demonstrations because they take time, and I don't mind doing them. I enjoy doing them, but they take a lot of time. And I found if I'm doing presentations, I put the tool in people's hands, and they're marked both in large print and braille, so they know exactly what they're holding in their hands as they pass them around the audience in the presentation, that I can introduce them to more tools and concepts without involving food. Anyone who has filmed with food, any of the cooking shows, anything like that, cooking food in real time for filming can be quite complicated. And in fact, in terms of art, photographing food is its own branch of art, food photography, because it can be so complicated. So, and I think storytelling is so important. I try to keep my stories short, but it connects the humanness of the people in the audience to me, that I'm not this superpower or whatever, cook or whatever, but I'm just a human being too. And sometimes things go wrong. And I tell stories of when things go wrong, but I also tell stories of when things go right. And so I think that helps connect on a human level. So that's it. It's less food demonstrations, more tool, hands-on with the tools, and stories and anecdotes that help connect people to the tool and help them believe that they could possibly do it too, because she's just human, just like I'm just human. And if she can do it, well, maybe I can do it too.
What kind of sort of stories and anecdotes do you have for the cooking?
So when I was in culinary school, we had Eggs Week, and you had to learn to make. You had to make a French rolled omelet. You had to make eggs over easy. You had to make eggs over well. You had to do a basted egg. For the first couple of months, I had a sighted guide to help me learn where the things. It was a huge commercial kitchen, and there were like 7 rooms. So she was there for about 2 months just to help me find where are the frying pans, where are the bench scrapers, where is the rice located. And so she was helping me, and during this was in the early days of it, she would tell me what the chefs were doing. And so the chef would have like crack an egg in a pan, and he'd go to flip it. This is during Eggs Week for an over easy egg. But he didn't use a spatula. He tipped the pan forward and used his wrist to pop it up in the air, and then it did a 180-degree turn and came down in the pan. And so that's how I thought we had to do it. So when I went home, I got a piece of toast at the advice of a friend who used to cook for a breakfast restaurant. He said, practice with toast. And then you're not breaking eggs and stuff like that. You can flip it. If it falls down, no big deal. And so then I had to move on to eggs, because this all happens within 1 week. So I have a work tray, which is basically like a institutional tray. I use them for everything in the blind kitchen. But I have a tray by my stove. I had my pan right next to it. And then I had 3 dozen eggs. And so I would crack the egg into the pan, and then I would cook it, and I would then take it off the heat, and instead of flipping it over the stove, where if I missed, which I did plenty of times, now I'm doing it over that work tray, and so if it falls, it's in this container with these slight walls, so it wasn't as big of a mess to contain. It was organized and contained. And I did those eggs, and I got it about half right. About half of them, well, about 3/4 of them made it back into the pan by the end, but sometimes the yolks would break. Like I'd flipped it too high, or the egg was too. There's a lot of things that could go wrong with eggs. So when the time for the thing came, the practical exam, I told the chef, I said, I'm ready for this, and he's like, what are you ready for? I said, I'm ready to flip my egg, and he figured out what was going on here. Guess what? Everybody else was using spatulas. I thought that I had to flip it in the air like that. So he said, everybody come on over here. We're going to watch Deborah do this. And I was praying to the egg gods, please let this land well. And I did it, and I flipped it, and it worked. I couldn't believe it. Everybody started cheering and stuff like that. That's the kind of story that blends. Sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I don't get it right. Sometimes I'm praying to food gods to help get it right. And people can relate to that, because we're all human. Nobody gets everything right, and especially under pressure in a test. Now everybody's watching. It only makes things worse. So I felt like I'd won an Olympic medal that day.
I suppose that leads me on to the next question about reactions. So what reaction or misunderstanding have you had from your audience that surprised you the most?
I have just a lovely story. So I was on a podcast, Blind Boys Chat. One of the blind men is in Ireland, and the other one is in the Netherlands. And the blind guy in Ireland has a wife that can see. And so I have a glove that we sell. It's called a cut glove, and it's a cut resistant glove. It's relatively thin and stretchy, but when you put it on your hand, so I actually put it on my hand in presentations, and then I am wearing the glove and I put my palm upwards to the ceiling. And then I grab a very sharp knife. It's a 10-inch chef knife, and I run it back and forth against my palm, and I make sure I get the blade near my microphone so people can hear that thing is actually moving back and forth against that fabric, and it never cuts through. I can feel the movement, I can feel the pressure, but my hand is quite safe. And the Irish woman said, "My knees are going wobbly." It was adorable.
What is the hardest recipe you've had to adapt?
The hardest one for me in culinary school, and I never really did get it right because it does require some vision, although I was able to tease it out enough, was hollandaise sauce. And the problem is you take an acid like white wine vinegar and water and you put it in a container and then you have to reduce it to half. Well, both of those are clear. And so it ended up getting to the point where I had to just kind of basically, let's say we put in 4 tablespoons of the combined liquid, and I would start removing it until I had in a pan 2 tablespoons after it's reducing down, and then just get rid of the rest and then put it in. But it was very difficult for me to know. And then also when you're whisking it and you're adding the fat in to make the hollandaise sauce, there's a visual component to it that you added only a little bit at a time until it's incorporated. And that can be really hard to detect through your whisk or whatever. So hollandaise sauce was, and still is, a challenge for me. But yeah, but I tend to focus on the ones that I can make really good. And you can't hardly go wrong with egg yolks and butter and a seasoning, nutmeg and things like that. Even if it doesn't look like everyone else's, the taste is going to be amazing pretty much every time.
What's one tool you can't live without?
It would be the talking thermometer. Definitely, because I don't want to make people sick. Plus, it gives me information. I can tell when baked goods are done, if they reach 208, I know it's done in the middle. I don't have to do the toothpick thing or whatever. But the other extremely useful tool for me is that work tray I talked about. It's 14 inches by 18 inches. It's got slightly raised sides. You find them like in high school or in great educational or hospitals and then fast food places. They're just serving trays that people use. They're virtually indestructible. I use mine for a cutting board because if I use a flat wooden cutting board, things fall off the edges onto the counter and then I've got more cleanup. If I'm using this as a cutting board, I've never cut through it. It scars, but it doesn't cut through. Then I can cut the food into even really small pieces and I know it's going to be in this predictable, contained, clean area. I also use it if I'm making a recipe. One of the advice I heard from a sighted chef, not talking about blindness, he said, don't turn off on the stove until you're ready to cook. So if I get a work tray and I set it to the side and I put it on it, the ingredients I'm going to need. So let's say I'm making like some type of an Asian stir-fry sauce. So I need soy sauce, I need fish sauce, I may need oyster sauce, I may need ginger, I may need toasted sesame oil. So if I've got my pan, my meat or vegetables are frying in the pan and I can hear it sizzling across the room, my head's in my refrigerator trying to figure out which one is fish and which one is oyster, it's going to make it a very anxiety-producing exercise for me because I can hear that food cooking on the other side and I don't know how long it's going to take. But if I have solved all those problems before I even turn on that stove, it's just going to be if my herbs are all chopped, if my garlic is grated, if everything is all in place, then it's going to be much more pleasant for me. I'm not going to be solving problems and panicking and where is that spoon? I need that spoon. So those trays help me to keep that very, very organized. And the other place they come in handy is, let's say I'm seasoning chicken or some other protein, or I'm making eggs in, that cracking shells. Those protein, they can contaminate things. They grow harmful bacteria at incredibly high rates when they're at room temperature or higher. And so I want to be real careful that whatever contaminants that chicken will contain, I'm not ready to cook it yet. I've still got a little bit more work to do. I can season that chicken on that dish and then move that work tray off to the side. And now I know I'm not going to put a cloth on it by accident. I'm not going to touch it by accident because I know where it's at. And I'm not worried that that chicken juice is going to leak out or get on surfaces where I don't know where they're at. And so that's another place those go. And just another quick one, sometimes with the blind kitchen, and this is for most cooks that hear this say, oh my gosh, that's a game changer. I run a couple of inches of soapy water in the sink. It's the first thing I do when I start to cook. And that's so if I'm doing things like cracking eggs or seasoning where my fingers could be contaminated, instead of coming down in front of the sink, adjusting the faucet, turning on the water control, pumping the soap, then rinsing it, because now I've got to go back and decontaminate all those areas that I've touched before I was able to soap up my hands. But if I have that soapy water there, now I can use the back of my hands if they're clean, I can use my forearms, and I've just got to find my way to that sink, plunge my fingers in it, and there, I'm ready to go. Now I can reach for the faucet and wash them properly. But now I don't have to go back and contaminate. So that's another one of those things that I bring the chicken over, the seasoned chicken, I'll set it off into a safe place, and then I can immediately plunge my fingers, and I'm good to go with the next step of the recipe.
And is there anything you think we haven't covered that you'd like to cover?
I don't think so. I think you've covered a lot of things. You've covered that there's a wide age range that can cook safely and independently despite vision loss. The only one other thing that I'd like to say is there, with this aging population that we have, there are a lot of people that don't identify as blind or deaf. I mean, you may say, grandma's hard of hearing now. She's not going to call herself deaf, and her family isn't if she doesn't have a formal diagnosis. But she's having problems. And it's the same thing with vision loss. There are a lot of adults out there that they can't see as well as they used to. And that generally happens when you age. It's part of the fun. So I would like to point out that you don't have to be blind or visually impaired or identify as such to be able to use what's happening in the blind kitchen. Sometimes it just makes your life easier. If you are straining to see a little more, or if you can't see in the dark and you're outside grilling and you used to like it, now you're like, oh, that's too dangerous. The reality is it's not. And so there's a wide spectrum on the vision scale. And so I think there are a lot of people out there that could benefit but would never search under the words blind. So I appreciate you allowing me to be on your platform. So maybe it'll spark ideas in people's heads and give them a resource that can help them to help their loved ones be able to return to the activity and the love language that they so much enjoyed.
If this episode inspired you, share it with a friend or family member who loves to cook, sighted or not. And don't forget to follow the podcast so you never miss stories of resilience, creativity and connection. To learn more about The Blind Kitchen and explore adaptive cooking tools, visit theblindkitchen.com. Let's keep the conversation and the cooking going.